first step is to create a database. Now, you can create a database on your local hard drive, or you can create a database on your shared network server. So if you're working independently, you might just do it on your local hard drive. If you're collaborating with other people, you could do it on your server. That's up to you. I'm going to do it locally just because of the way I'm connected. So I'm just going to call it sample database. You can call it whatever you want. You might give it the project name, the client's name, whatever you want to call it. And it's creating a Microsoft SQL Server database. Then you're going to open it, and you see it's listed here at the top. And so I'm going to open it. Obviously, it's empty. It doesn't have any data. I just created it. And in the lower right, I can see the name of the database that I'm in. And so I'm going to tangent just real quickly. I can open up a second instance of Sentinel Visualizer. And so I could open up the same database. I could open up a different database. The point is, you can pop back and forth between the two instances. Maybe you're working on two different projects at the same time, or maybe for whatever reason you want the same database open in each instance. There are times you might need that. So the point is, you can have multiple instances of Sentinel Visualizer open. Okay. So again, we're in the database called Sample Database. Now the first thing you need to know is under Manage Database, this is where you define mostly your entity types, your relationship types, and your metadata types. Those are the three main areas of your data, because entities and relationships appear on the screen. Metadata kind of sits in the background for filtering, decluttering, searching. So an example of an entity might be a person. A relationship might be this person works with this other person. That's a relationship between two entities. And the metadata against a person might be male, female, might be eye color, things like that. So when you create a database, the system comes with all of these entity types. This is the default values. But you can customize the database by hitting Add New Item, putting in a new entity type. I don't know what your data is. Maybe you're dealing with trade shows, or maybe you're dealing with ships or something. I don't know. So you put the name of the new entity type, you choose an icon. Now you can use your own icons, your ICO files, or you can just use a default that comes with the system. And you'll see here I have just added this new entity type to the database. So that's how you customize the database to your specific data requirements. Now the second main area is relationship type. The system comes with all of these relationship types. But again, you can customize. Add new item, new relationship type, whatever you want to call it. Now the category and the metadata category, those come into play for reporting and filtering. We're going to skip them. It's kind of getting into the weeds. We don't have all that much time. But you can define those as well. And so now I have just, go ahead.
Yeah, can I take out defaults if I've got a database, for instance, and I say, boy, there's a lot of stuff on this default that I really don't want to have to deal with. Can I also take them out of a particular database?
Sure. Just highlight them and hit delete.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. Now, that does kind of get into the issue of, let's say you never want most of these, and you just have your own little database with maybe 3 entities and 5 relationships and 6 metadata types, and that's all you want to use every single time. There's a way to do that. It gets a little bit into the weeds. We'll come back to a little bit later, or we'll have another session.
So if we wanted to eliminate all the crime category types, we could just designate crime and then all of them would disappear?
Well, no, you would have to highlight each one and delete item. Now there's a way to...
Auto sort so we can get them all at one time?
Yes, okay, so if you all want to go there, let's go there. So there's a program called Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. It's in your user guide. It probably talked about it when you, in the README when you installed the software. But anyway, is anyone there familiar with this program?
Yes, just in the fact I know they had to deal with that with loading it when they were building the system.
Okay,
and
good.
putting it in.
This is the tool that you use to, if you want to delete things en masse, you know, delete all crime-related metadata, delete all crime-related relationships, that kind of thing. You go into
and that'll remove it for every instance that like
okay.
moving forward.
Okay.
Right?
That's a fair question, and we can do that. It's going to take up some time regarding training, but if that's what you want me to show you, I will show that to you.
No. I was more worried that we were just kind of, you know what I mean? Like I was more concerned that we might want it down the road.
Right. There's definitely a way where, just long story short, what you would do is you would take our default database, delete all the items you want, you know, devote 20 minutes to just deleting all of the items, then customizing, adding whatever items you want, and then long story short, let's just say, I don't have anything called master here, but let's just say you had something called master database. You would back it up, you would create a backup of it, and then you would restore it each time that you wanted to create a new database.
Okay.
In other words, you have this empty shell with just your definitions, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Ask whatever you'd like. It's just, you know, depends upon what you're interested in. Anyway, this is the tool, Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. That's what you would use. Okay. So just to review, you can customize your entities, you can customize your relationships, and you can customize your metadata. Those are the three main areas that you're dealing with, okay? Now, also get used, now see how I have these different tabs open here at the bottom? I can close one at a time by hitting this black X in the top right or hitting this close icon. But there's if you go to Window and Close All, that's just a quick way to close all the tabs en masse. You don't have to do it one at a time. Okay. So far we've created a database, we've customized the database, and generally the next step is to import data. But we're going to do a couple things prior to that. Actually, let me open up some data sets. I'm going to start with something very simple. So here we have this set of data. It's just two columns. It's just a company and a person that's associated with the company. The problem is there's 5,500 rows of data. It's pretty much impossible to discover connections. It's just too big. So you got to kind of ask yourself, well, what is it you're trying to find out from your data? Well, I want to know how people are connected to each other through companies, something like that, right?
Right.
So again, it's a very simple example, but we're just going to start off slow. So this is a good exercise prior to using your import data tool. Open up your visualizer, and I'm going to move this spreadsheet over to my other monitor just so I can look at it at the same time. And go to Add Items, and you say, well, what is it I'm trying to discover? Well, I only have two columns of data, company and people, so this is pretty straightforward. But what I'm trying to do is I'm going to drag and drop the company. And by the way, I'm holding down my control key and spinning my mouse wheel. That lets you zoom in and out. Now you have these zoom features here as well, but I kind of like the control mouse wheel. Lets you zoom in and out like that, okay? So I have the company in column A, and then I have the person in column B, and I want to connect them. So I'm going to draw a relationship, and I'm going to connect these two entities. Now, if I right-click on the relationship, I can then see all of the relationship types that are in my system. So I might say employee of, or I might say employed by, or I might use a generic relationship called linked to. Again, the name of the relationship is up to you, but in a very simple scenario like this, I'm really just trying to connect column A and B. So keep that in mind. Everybody with me so far?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. But we don't have to draw it. We can use our import data tool. And so the first, after hitting import data, the first thing you want to do is call up your data. You can bring in a text delimited file, an Excel spreadsheet, or an Access database. So my data is in Excel. I'm going to point to wherever my data is. I have a lot of different examples here. Let me just find where it is. And here's the data. We bring it in. And notice that my source data here, company and person, corresponds to the spreadsheet. We give you a little preview down here. Everybody with me so far?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to add an entity, and I'm going to connect, take this little black dot and connect it, and I'm going to tell Sentinel Visualizer that this is a company. Now, for cosmetic reasons, you'll see why in a moment, I'm going to label this column A. Then I'm going to add another entity, and I'm going to connect the person, and I'm going to label this column B. Now, I have a company and a company and a person. How do we connect a company and a person? How do we connect two entities? How do we connect column A and column B? Anybody want to take a guess?
Relationship.
Add a relationship. That's right. Remember, you connect two entities through a relationship. So we're going to connect the company and the person, and we're going to call this, whatever we want to call it by. Let's just keep it simple, employee of. Remember, I'm just choosing the name of the relationship out of my pre-existing list. Remember how we went into Manage Database and we can customize? Remember I added new relationship type? So I'm just choosing it out of my list. Now this is cosmetic, what I'm typing in here. It's not logical. It's purely for me as the human, because what you can do is save your map. And you can call it whatever you want, company to person, A to B, whatever you name it. The point is it becomes a file that you can use over and over again. So if you have a set of data in this format and you get a new set of data tomorrow or next week or next year, you don't have to draw this map every time. All you have to do is open the map, connect your new data set, and hit import. So before I hit import, any questions?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, so this is a very simple example. It's only 2 columns. We're just choosing a generic relationship. Let me hit import. Okay, so, I had 5,500 rows. Okay, so it didn't take too long. So it took 50 seconds to import that data. Let's see what it looks like. So this is also important. There are lots of different ways to find your data. If you want to say, just show me everything in the database, you go to Dataset Builder. There are a couple of in-between steps here that I'm going to skip over for brevity's sake. I'm just going to hit Next in the lower right 3 times. And you can see I have 4,700 entities and 5,500 relationships. Now, if I hit the plus sign behind these, I can see all the employees of that company. But if I hit Next and then Finish, it'll display my entire database on the visualizer. Now, there were a couple in between steps where I could declutter. Now, it's a rather large network. Let me redraw it using the circular layout. And we can see it's a pretty big network, lots of different connections, and then we have a lot of little networks down here. So this is where the Navigator comes into play. And again, I'm going to click here in the Navigator. I'm going to use my control mouse wheel to zoom out. And if I draw a little box down here, I can zoom in even smaller. Here, I'll zoom in here, control mouse wheel. We can see how, I don't know if y'all can see that, all of these employees are connected to Well Choice, to insurance company, to Gray Bar Electric. These aren't real meaningful, you know, it's just kind of showing that particular company. It's really this bigger network that has some interesting things. So if we go around the edge, even closer, it's a rather large network. We can kind of see some more examples, but then you see some connections to other things over there. So what we're going to do is we're going to zoom out, and I'm going to declutter. This is also another tool that you got to get used to. There are lots of different ways to declutter. I'm just going to pick one by degree, meaning the number of connections. So I'm going to say I'm interested only in those entities that have 5 or more connections. And when I apply it, it decluttered. Now let me show you again. At the whole, or the entire database, look down here on the left. We have 4775 entities, 5509 relationships. Well, maybe I'm not really interested in all those. I'm interested only in those with X or more connections. So if I put in, I'm just picking 5, and I apply it, now we drop down to 117 entities and 123 relationships. So I've really isolated those entities that are connected to multiple other entities. And I'm going to take this result, this filtered result, and send it to a new visualizer. So notice at the bottom here, it's going to open a new window pane, and now I have isolated just those that are highly degreed. And now we've really honed in on those companies and or people that have a lot of intermediaries that are connected to a lot of other entities. You see that? Mm-hmm. So A, it would have been pretty difficult to figure out these connections from that set of raw data. And B, I'm really getting rid of the noise. I'm decluttering. So I can go back to my original visualization, remove the filter, and do it some other way. But the point is, you can declutter by absolute values and or what we call network metrics and or other things, entities and relationship types and things like that. But again, I don't want to get too into the weeds. But the point is, we have now isolated this guy, Thomas Keene. He's associated with 4 different companies. And he's connected to James Johnson through United Health. Or how do I go from Linda Alvarado over to James Jameson? By using our shortest path tool, if you can see that red line, and I can filter out, and I can see that these 2 people have an intermediary. So again, I don't know what your exact data is, but it's an example of how we took some raw data, 5,500 rows of data, and discovered connections. Shall we take it a little bit further? In that, I'd like to show you how to expand on the data import map with a more complex import with more complex data, okay?
Sure.
Okay. I mean, if you think I'm getting too detailed or whatever, just let me know. All right, so I think I think I'll do this one, even though you might not be doing gift card fraud, which is what this is. By the way, any data that I'm showing to you is either scrambled or publicly available, so I'm not showing anything secret or private.
Right.
But the point is that I know this data set's a little bit more complex, and maybe you'd get a little bit more out of it if I showed you something a little more complicated, okay? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to close everything. I'm going to create another database. I'll just call it test2 or whatever. And then I'm going to open it. So now I'll purposely make a couple mistakes, and I'll show you how to fix them, specifically on the data import map. So let's look at what this data is. This is basically gift card transactions, and it doesn't matter if it's bank transactions, credit card transactions, or people sending an email to other people. It's just an event. The fact that this is a gift card number doesn't really matter. It could be a member number, it could be an ID number, it could be a phone number, a social security number. It's just data. The key is that it's structured in columns and rows.
So it wouldn't matter if it was in another language.
Correct. The language doesn't matter. The names of the column headers don't matter, as long as it's structured. In other words, in fact, I think someone asked about this at the beginning, so let's just do an example. Let's say you had some data, and you weren't quite sure how to construct it. So you had the person, let's say you had the role, and let's say, I'm going to use musical groups because I'm an old person. So let's say you had 4 people, John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And you had a singer, and you had a bass, bassist, and you had guitar player, and you had drummer, right? And they were all in the Beatles, right? In fact, well, okay. So then you had another set of data, and maybe you're typing it by hand or whatever. And so you had, again, singer, you had guitarist, guitar player, I guess, and bassist. Okay. And these were the Stones, right? You can tell I'm old. So here's the thing. How would you want to represent this? Well, you would connect A to C because the person belongs to the band, right? And B could be used as metadata. In other words, it kind of sits behind the scene where you could say, show me all my bases. Or in real life, this might be president, CEO, mailroom clerk, director. And you might want to filter by title. But my main point is, it doesn't have to be on separate. There's 2 different ways to construct it. So Paul was in a band called Wings. So you might have band 2 here, and you have something in here called Wings, and you have something here. Sorry, I'm showing my age. Sorry. The point is, you can connect A to C, and you can connect A to D in the same import, because this is all one row. Now, you could also construct it where Paul is down here and the name of the band is here, and you don't have D. You can construct it that way as well. And there all you're doing is connecting A to C. So it really depends on how you want to construct your data. This can be empty. You can have empty cells. But remember, you're connecting columns. All right, everybody with me?
Right.
Okay. So let's get back to this one. Here we have lots of information. We have some dollar values. We have a gift card number. We have a store number. We have dates. We have locations. We have subject or suspect names. And we have an activity. what they did. They went onto the sales floor, they made a purchase, they made a return, whatever it is. So I'm asking myself, well, what is it I'm trying to find out from this data? Well, basically, I want to see which subjects or suspects made purchases at which store and on which date. Does this seem like a useful scenario that I could demo?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, okay, so I'm already in my new database, test2. Now, I'm going to purposely make some mistakes so I can show you how to fix them. So I'm just going to jump right into import data. I'm not going to go into Visualizer and draw it out and see what I'm trying to do. I'm just going to do it on the fly. So I'm going to go to import data, and I'm going to call up my source data. I can't find where it is. Hold on. Oh, here it is. Okay, so this is my data. And again, notice we give you a preview down here at the bottom, and my source data, card value, sold, redeemed, et cetera, corresponds to each column. So I talked about how I want to connect the subject to the store number.
Yes.
So my store number is in D, and my subject or suspect is in Q. So I'm going to add an entity. I'm going to connect my subject, and I'm going to tell Sentinel Visualizer that this is a person. Now, you don't have to label it, but it just kind of helps me keep track of what I'm doing. So I'm going to label this column Q. I'm going to add another entity, and I'm going to connect the store number. Hold on, I'm looking at my other monitor here. Store loaded at, okay. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. I don't have anything here called store. And I want to use an entity type called store. So temporarily, I'm going to name it company, just as a placeholder. And I'm going to show you how to fix that. Now, I could label this store, but see, to me, it's already here, so why duplicate it? I'd rather call it column D. It's your data, however, and you can call it whatever you want. So here I have two entities, and I'm a big believer in saving often. So even though I'm not done, I'm going to save it to an SVI2 file. That's a Sentinel Visualizer import version 2. I believe my programmers had a Freudian slip when they named it I2, but I don't know if you all are familiar. They're a competitor of ours. Anyway, it's an actual file on the hard drive that you can use in different databases. All right. So again, the question is, how do we connect a person and a store? How do we connect two entities? Exactly, we add a relationship. And this is where it starts to get very cool. So I'm going to connect the person and the company. And by the way, this determines the direction of the arrow on the visualization. So you could make it from the store to the person. I mean, that's almost incidental, but it does determine which way the arrow points. So what do we want to call the relationship? Well, I could call it purchased, but it's not really always purchased. Remember, the activity makes return, goes to floor. All right, so maybe I just want to use something generic called link to. But that's not quite right either, because they did all kinds of different things. They made returns, they went onto the sales floor, they did additional purchases. So this is where it gets very cool. You can take any column and make it the name of the relationship type on the fly. So here I have activity. I'm going to connect that to the relationship type, and Sentinel Visualizer will automatically bring in those values as the relationship type. I don't have to go into Manage Database and define it first. So it's a very useful feature where you can connect a column on the fly and it'll bring in that value. Okay? Now, we have dates. We have a start date and an end date. Anybody, should I connect the dates to the person? Should I connect the dates to the store? Or should I connect the dates to the relationship? Relationship, exactly. Now, in this case, I happen to have a start and end date, so I can connect both start and end, because you're going to want to use the time range tool if you have date-sensitive information. If you do not have an end date and you have only one date, you can connect the same date to both start and end, because like a phone call, for example, it's not perpetual. It's not a phone call that lasts forever. It just occurs that day. So you can connect that same date to both start and end. But in this case, we happen to have an end date, so I'm going to connect it. So little by little, we're building the map. Let's think of some other things we can connect. Here, I'll bring the spreadsheet over here, just make it a little bit easier. So we did store number. Would we want to search by gift card number? Would we want to search by transaction? Would we want to assign the kind of ID that they used? Those are examples of metadata. They don't really appear on the screen. I don't really want to see the gift card number on the screen per se, but I might want to search the database. So, as an example, let's say I might want to search my database by the transaction number. Does that belong to the person, the store, or the relationship?
The relationship.
The relationship, theoretically, it could belong to the store as well, but let's connect it to the relationship by adding metadata. So I clicked that button, add metadata. I'm going to connect the transaction number, and then I have to tell it what it is. Well, I don't have transaction number here. So far, I've made two mistakes. I did not plan ahead. One is I didn't have store as an entity type, and I didn't have transaction number as a metadata type. So I'm going to show you how to fix those. So the first thing I'm going to do is save my map because I don't want to redo everything I just did. I'm going to close this form. I'm going to go to Manage Database. The first thing I'm going to do is add entity type. I'll call it store or whatever you want. It doesn't have to match. You can call it whatever you want. And I'll just choose something here. And I'm going to go to, what was the other one, metadata, and I'm going to add transaction number. There's also a couple very cool features here, but we just don't have the time. So I'm just going to add transaction, and now you see we have it in our list. Now I'm going to go back into import data, and when you hit import data, what we're doing is we're uploading everything to RAM. That's why I had to close it down. So I'm going to reopen my map. I'm going to reconnect my data source because I closed it. So I have to tell Sentinel Visualizer what data source I'm using. Now I have store in this list because you're working in RAM. So it has to be in the database first. That's why you want to kind of plan ahead. And also in here I now have transaction, and I can save my work. Okay, I'll do one more thing just so you can see how it works. Actually, maybe two more things. So there's a declutter tool called value. So here I have values of transactions. I might want to say just show me transactions that were $200 or more or something like that. So again, I'm going to take my value and connect it to the relationship. It's not the value of the person, it's not the value of the store, it's the value of the relationship. Now, for lat long and or something like postal code, in other words, if you want to send it out to Google Earth, there's a couple different ways to do it depending upon how you want to show it. But basically, this lat long is the lat long of the store. So I'm going to connect my lat long to the store entity. You see how I did that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the main point is, little by little, I've built this map. I didn't do it all at once. I just thought about, what is it I'm trying to do? What can I take advantage of? What kinds of things do I want to know? Again, I'm going to save this. But there is one other way to connect location information, and that's by adding an entity, making it a location entity type, and connecting the value. Now, this also gets into data structure. In its current state, see these 4 columns? We have address, city, state, and zip. The only thing that's really going to work is either state or zip, because because Google Earth cannot find that on its own. It doesn't know where that is. Now, it'll know zip code, it'll know state, it'll know country, it might know city, but if you have a city called Columbus, it's not going to know where Columbus is. There's 15 million Columbuses in the world. Mm-hmm. So the point is, if your data is structured like this and you want to show it on Google Earth, you'd have to use state or zip, because this is enough for Google Earth to locate it. The correct way really would be concatenating it, where in effect you'd have 1, 2, 3 Main Street, any town, Maryland, 20903, something like that, because Google Earth can translate that, and that will really pinpoint it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you need enough.
Value.
Yeah, you need enough for Google Earth to translate it. That was my main point. Anyway, so I'll just use zip as an illustration kind of thing. So we're going to connect zip.
You make an entity location.
Okay.
Right. The key is that the entity type is location. Now, you can, kind of getting off on a tangent here, but let me just show you. You can, even though this is a country entity type, you can click that it's a location. So even, or manufacturer, because you might have address information in the description, and so you have to tell Sentinel Visualizer that it's a location. We're getting off on a tangent a little bit, but for all intents and purposes, just make your entity type location. And then, of course, you have to add a relationship. You have to connect the store to that location, and you might just call it located in, like that. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the point is twofold. A, if you don't have Latin long, that's how you add location. And B, your map can get huge. You have 20 columns of data. You might have 13 different entity types and 12 different relationships, or 20 factorial entities and relationships. I mean, each column can be an entity, a relationship, and or metadata. That's really my main point, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll just kind of keep it simple. I'm just going to do this. Let's import the data. It's not a huge database. It's only 246 rows. Let's look at it. Again, I'm going to use the Dataset Builder. And this is my data visualized. And we can kind of see that the relationship types were brought in on the fly. Goes on the sales floor. I didn't define that in advance. Sentinel Visualizer brought those in on the fly. Notice some have multiple relationships. So when you click details down here, as I highlight the different relationships, you'll see it changes down here. You see that? Here's 4
Can you
relationships.
explain a little bit about the weight and value and how those are determined?
Okay, right. So now my data set didn't have it, but let me bring up a different database just so I can illustrate it real quickly. I don't have to do a lot of setup. I'm going to bring up a different database that has that in it.
Just in general?
Well, basically...
So while you're doing...
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you can ask it if you want.
Just before you shut this down, so if, let's say I had 5 spreadsheets on like different cases or something like that that held this information, once I have that database structure, I can attach it to any one of those 5 spreadsheets with the information.
Well,
I want to see... Yeah.
I'm going to reword your statement a little bit.
Yeah.
You can import any or all of those data sets into the same database.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay? Now, weight comes into play mostly through decluttering, but the point is that entities and relationships can have weight. For example, I have 4 siblings. I have a stronger relationship with my younger brother than I do with my oldest sister. So even though they're all the same kind of relationship, sibling, they have different weights. Just like here we had this law firm and they have 2 clients. This client, Robert Fuller, or whatever his name is, Lawrence Fuller, has a weight of 90, whereas this relationship to Roy Roberts has a weight of 30. So when you declutter by relationship weight, I can see that this is my stronger path. Even though it's the longer path, it's the stronger path. You see that? So you can declutter your network by saying, well, show me, in effect, what you're saying, show me the most important relationships. Now, you can also weight an entity. In other words, the pizza delivery guy, he has lots of connections to the ABC company because he's delivering pizza there all the time. But so what? They're not very important relationships. The CEO is much more important, even though he might not have as many relationships. You see what I'm saying?
So how are those weights assigned?
By you. They're manually assigned. You define your scale.
Okay.
Now, there are lots of...
Dan, yeah, one question before we go too far on the map. So you have the location for, we put in the location information and so on, and it has to, you mentioned it has to be something Google Earth can be understood
Can
by
translate,
Google Earth.
yes.
Yeah, is that only if we wanted to actually map it out? And in that instance, we'd have to make sure we have Google Earth installed?
Yes, correct. Yeah, if you're not doing anything with Google Earth, you don't have to worry about any location stuff.
Okay.
So I get
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, now, but there's really, well, I mean, I want to answer your questions, but we missed a couple things that I think are really important. But anyway, any other questions about weight?
So is this, if it's assigned by me because I change the eigenvector relationship?
Well,
or that's what I don't understand is I thought that would be drawn out for me.
Well, there are metrics that are calculated. Degree, closeness between this eigenvalue, those things. Those are calculated by Sentinel Visualizer, but the weight is assigned by you.
Okay, so that's just an extra value.
Okay.
We make that choice. That don't pay
so
attention.
So the data is driving that part of the relationship valuing.
The degree, closeness between his eigenvalues.
Closeness, centrality,
yes.
and eigenvalues driven by the data.
Yes.
Okay.
All righty. Okay, we're getting close to the end. There really are 1 or 2 things I wanted to show, but I'm going to bring up a different database because I know I have these other databases already populated, and it's just quicker to make the point with some other data. I need to show you at least one thing. Ultimately, well, first of all, an entity record, you can assign a picture as you see here. You have the briefing tab. You can copy and paste stuff from Wikipedia or from your PDF. You can attach metadata. We've talked about metadata a little bit. Topics, notes, documents. You can attach documents like, I don't know, maybe you have ABC Company and you submitted a proposal to them and you want to attach the proposal to their record. I don't know what you're doing, but you go into edit mode and it just kind of walks you through it. You can add the data or the document. But here's my main point. When you search your database for that person, place, or thing that you're looking for, and then you hit Visualizer, it'll default to showing the 1-degree network. In this case, his 1-degree connections to stores and transactions. And if you take one of these stores and expand on it, you start to see these other relationships. And in effect, you find this diagram here, right? You see Mark, you see Brian, you see these connections, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you want to send it to your client or your boss or your colleague. Well, you go to Output. And there's lots of different ways to do it. The two basic ways, one is Export. This gives you a simple PNG, JPEG, or bitmap that you can email, post on your website, put on your network, or whatever. But the very cool way is to go to XML and perform what we call an SVX export, Sentinel Visualizer export. And you call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it Mark. I've already done this. So, and it creates an SVX file. You see down here this SVX file? You can email that or post it on your website or give it to your boss or whatever. And they can install Sentinel Reader. They just go to the website, download Sentinel Reader, and they can open that diagram. But it's more than just a screenshot. I'm going to open up Reader. Notice that it's all grayed out because this is a free license. It's not, you can't edit, you can't change things. But as a Reader user, I can open an SVX file that you sent to me because I'm your client and you're doing something for me. So you sent this visualization, and it's more than just a screenshot. I can double-click on Mark and drill down to the briefing tab, the metadata, the notes, the documents, and drill down to the data behind the entity. So it's more than just a screenshot. It allows you to drill down into other things. So that's really the cool part about having Sentinel Reader if you're doing stuff for other people.